So this is a kind of cybercrime called ransomware, where the criminal groups break into your network, encrypt your data, and then steal it. And when they leave, they send you a ransom note saying, "We'll let you go back to business if you pay us." And the first request to Colonial was for $2 million. Pardon me. The second request was for $4 million. This is a well-paying line of work if you can get it. What it is the hackers find some way to get in. They then implant the malware, extract the data, and turn things off, right? So fairly traditional. Ransomware has grown astoundingly in the last couple of years. It started out was fairly small. Now it's the leading form of cybercrime in terms of money extracted. Not a complete surprise that it's a Russian group. The Russians dominate this kind of crime. It's so bad that the Russians have a rule. The Russian government has a rule for their cyber criminals that one of the things that their programs have to do, pardon me, is check. One of the things their programs have to do is check to see if it's a Russian language website or a Russian language network. If it's a Russian language network, the attack automatically stops. So this is targeted at the US, it's targeted at other people. What they did then is interfere with the operation of the pipeline. The pipeline supplies millions of gallons every day to the East Coast. And gas stations were worried about running into shortages. I will say that this reminded me of when the outbreak of the COVID pandemic and people stockpiled toilet paper. It's panic buying. We didn't run out of gas. It wasn't a big crisis, but it could have been if it hadn't been fixed. So we're lucky that basically about a week after the hack, Colonial was able to get back online. This is a big business. And so some of the earlier examples include Britain's National Health Service, the Maersk shipping line, which is one of the largest in the world. These people are not bashful against going after big targets because they know that's where look at the big money. We have very little influence over the Russians. When the Russians do something bad, we send them a nasty note and maybe we sanction them a little bit. They just shrug it off. So the future is continued ransomware, continued cybercrime, unless we can find some way to get the Russian government to step in. I'm not worried about a big attack on critical infrastructure. The Russians know that we might retaliate with force if they were to do that, if the electrical grid, they could turn off the electrical grid, but they're unlikely to do it. In this case, the hackers even put out sort of an apology. We're sorry, we didn't realize this was the target. Now, they didn't stop asking for the money, but the Russians aren't crazy. They aren't going to start a war. It's like the mafia. This is extortion. They show up at your restaurant and say, pay protection money. And a lot of companies will go along with that. So that's the future until we can figure out a way to deal with the Russians. Colonial did a good job after they were hacked. They quickly turned off their pipeline so there weren't any explosions or leaks. They turned off their system so there wasn't further damage. They worked with the government and some private companies to make sure that the data that the Russians stole wasn't useful, right? So they did good things after they were hacked. It's the before they were hacked part that needs a little work, right? Because stopping ransomware is not rocket science. There's some basic things you can do. Just yesterday, the White House released an executive order on cybersecurity. And if people actually do what it says, the odds of this kind of thing happening again will go down. It won't go down to zero, but ransomware isn't rocket science. We can certainly make it harder for criminals to succeed. The executive order had basically three parts. It had federal organization. I mean, it restored the organization we had a few years ago that said which agency was responsible for what. Pardon me. It set out best practices, and this is where it will have the most effect in the near term, because the best practices only apply to the federal government. This is aimed at federal agencies, but it's encrypt your data at rest. use two-factor authentication, log cyber incidents so you know what's going on, monitor your networks, share information. All these are good steps. And the hope is that by saying federal agencies have to do it, and the companies that sell to federal agencies have to do it, it will improve cybersecurity in the private sector. The most dramatic part is a requirement for secure development of software. Uh, the people who reviewed SolarWinds, which is what this EO is in response to, found some amazing, amazing mistakes in the code. It's like no one even thought about security. And so the biggest part of the executive order focuses on getting people to write software more securely if they want to sell to the federal government. So those three things put together could make the situation better for us in the future.